When a parent loses a child, I mean, it's horrendous. But imagine losing all three at once. Like they've vanished. They've been gone for 14 years now. 14 years, that's a long time. No proof of life at any moment in those 14 years. Which brings me to the next question in our investigation. Why haven't they been declared dead? I know it's sad to think about it. I know you want to keep your hope alive, but Mom believes that they are dead. Like, at what point? What does it take? No proof of life, 14 years, three of them, all at once. Joining me, Michigan attorney known as Big Case Mike. Mike Jaafar is with us. Great to have you both here. Mike, what are your thoughts here about why hasn't this happened?
I think this is ridiculous. I think they should have been declared dead. I mean, there's a difference, obviously, between declaring them dead in a probate instance and then in a criminal arena. If you look at this case long enough, Vinny, a part of your soul dies, right? Simply. Even me reading about the case, these three boys disappeared. They were 9, 7, and 5. I have 3 kids. They're 9, 7, and 5 today, right? So a part of your soul just dies when you look at this case. I could only imagine that the reason that the state of Michigan has not brought murder charges because the prosecution is just gun shy, right? Because at the end of the day, this case has everything, right? These boys are dead, right? The principle of logic, Occam's razor, that says the most likely explanation to a complex situation is usually the most obvious solution. That's the explanation, right? Do we actually believe that these kids were given to a lady on the side of the street or taken to an underground situation where there's somebody raising them? People have a hard time raising their own kids, let alone the 3 kids of a stranger who were allegedly molested by their mom and then kidnapped by their dad, who also is a monster, right? I think these boys should have been declared dead. I think that her probate petition is going to be approved, but it's a different situation, obviously, than having criminal charges come at them.
I want you to take a listen to John Skelton, the father. This is a phone interview with a reporter from WXYZ.
Just because people are saying they're making a murder investigation does not mean that the boys are dead.
Why do you think they've switched this to a murder investigation? What do you think leads them to believe that your kids are dead?
There's nobody to collaborate, seeing them. There's no pictures of these people. We covered our text too well.
Well, that part, Mike, does sound true, covering tracks, because this is a situation where his home was completely destroyed, right? It was in shambles inside that home, right? But they didn't really uncover anything that would tell investigators that something necessarily happened to the boys. But there's 3 of them, from like 9, I think 9, 7, and 5 at the time, I believe, or about the ages of these 3 boys. They're not going to be runaways. They're not. No one's raising them. Everything points in one direction, but it seems some tracks were covered here.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I could understand that investigators did not want to presume them dead, obviously, after they did the initial investigation, right? 14 years ago, 12 years ago, even 10 years ago. But 8 years ago and after that, I mean, it's ridiculous for anyone to think that these young men are still alive, right? The oldest kid was 9 when he was supposedly taken to an underground cult, right? 9. So he knew he had a mom. He knew what she looked like. He knew literally how her voice sounded, right? There are kids who are born through IVF who, once they find out that their actual parents are not their real parents, they crawl over broken glass to find the parent. The oldest kid, if he was alive, he would have found his mom a long time ago, right? But I could understand investigators not jumping to that conclusion when the initial investigation happened. It made total sense. But right now, I mean, this is ridiculous. These kids are gone, right? Anybody who believes that these kids are still alive with an underground cult, I mean, you might as well believe that they're living with Bigfoot. There's just no other explanation other than these boys perished. Question of where and when is a different issue.
And it's a classic case, Mike, where it's a custody battle, and we cover a lot of these stories, unfortunately, on Court TV. Sometimes it's a spouse that gets murdered, and sometimes it's a child who loses their life. But you look at this, even the circumstances surrounding this also points in that direction.
Oh, yeah, completely agree, right? Completely agree with that, because at the end of the day, this is just a completely classic case. Because here's the thing, right? My co-panelist mentioned, how there wasn't like a camera on every door and like it is now, right? There's been an evolution in the way criminal cases like this have been looked at, right? If this was not in 2025, if it was in 1925, you have way more than enough evidence to charge this person with murder, right? In 1925, you wouldn't have known that he took the kids on his horse and buggy and crossed state lines to Ohio. You know that now, right? 1925, all you know is these boys were in your custody and then they disappeared, right? You still have enough, in my opinion, to know that these boys were murdered, right? But we're in 2025. These kids would have found their mom.
Absolutely.
The oldest kid was not.
Brings me to our next question in our investigation. Will John Skelton ever be charged with murder? We've seen plenty of cases and trials where people have been charged where the victim's body or the victim's remains have not been recovered. Will John Skelton ever be charged with murder? Joining me, Michigan attorney known as Big Case Mike. Mike Jaafar is with us. Mike, what are your thoughts here? So many years later.
I think they should bring charges, and I'll tell you why, right? My plea to any prosecutor who's looking at this case is don't look at reasons not to bring these charges. Look at reasons to bring these charges, right? You don't look at the reasons the things that make you fearful of bringing charges. Just bring the charges, because at the end of the day, the interests of justice are going to be, pushed forward if you bring charges. Think about it. If you're worried about double jeopardy applying because you bring charges, you lose, and then later on the kids show up, the remains are found, right? There's other charges that the federal government could bring against them, predicate charges. But at the end of the day, these kids, you can't believe, we're the state that set a precedent with this case. We set a precedent, for example, with the Crumbly case, right? When the Crumbly case was brought in Michigan, people thought that was a crazy move, but now it's a precedent that's actually helping other states. Set a precedent here. If you have custody of your kids and they disappear with no explanation, and the villain behind it is a parent who's lied multiple times, set the precedent that you're going to bring murder charges. And if you convict that person, and then the kids, if an Amish wagon shows up at Tanya's house and drops off her adult children, and it turns out that we convicted this person incorrectly, he'll be out of jail in 30 days because his kid showed up, right? And by convicting him, then you're giving him even more, motivation and incentive to fess up and see what happened to these kids. So you should bring, there's all the reasons to bring the charges and no reasons not to bring the charges, because at the end of the day, if you're worried about anything, about losing or double jeopardy applying, well, this guy's going to be out of jail at the end of 2025. And so what's the point of even waiting on it? You have all these immense powers. Use them. At the end of the day, can you imagine this villain getting out of jail and showing up on podcasts and talking?
Oh, I think he might. I think he might.
Yeah.